The agri-food industry and farming in particular has suffered from a lot of people pointing fingers at it and basically saying you're a problem. I guess we're coming very much from a different perspective.
Hello and welcome to Agri-Focus with myself, Stella Meehan. And today I'm joined by Andy Kerr, Chief Strategy Officer with EIT Climate-KIC. Welcome to the podcast, Andy.
Thanks very much. I'm pleased to be here.
We're here at the EIT Climate-KIC conference at UCD today, a very special event. But first of all, can you give our listeners a little bit of background about yourself?
I'm now the Chief Strategy Officer. My background has been working in business, developing new businesses in innovation agencies, and also originally I had a PhD in climate change.
Wow. And how did you get involved then with Climate-KIC?
So we were working with Climate-KIC when I was running my innovation centre back in Edinburgh in Scotland, and we were partners with Climate-KIC, and the opportunity came to join Climate-KIC. Climate-KIC is one of the main European climate innovation agencies. So we are working across multiple countries to support the development of new solutions, new ideas, new approaches to tackle the climate challenge.
So essentially the Climate-KIC, I suppose, initiative really, when it started like that, was to provide countries with a way of becoming more sustainable, help them with their climate action targets and so on. So what essentially does it do now?
So the original intention was very much to focus on supporting the development of new products and services into the agri-food markets and city markets and others. It was also about building innovation ecosystems in different countries, by which we mean bringing together universities, businesses, entrepreneurs to help develop new solutions. Our experience within Climate-KIC was that it was very possible to develop new products, new services, take new companies to market. So we supported something over 2,000 companies to come to, as in very early stage companies, to come to the market. But what we were finding was that it wasn't actually changing anything on the ground, or not changing very much on the ground, and certainly not at the speed and scale that we need change to happen. So we did a bit of a shift 3 or 4 years ago now, which was to say, rather than just focus on the supply side of new ideas being pushed into the market, we needed to try and start to tackle the barriers, the things that were stopping the growth of these new solutions. And actually what you find is a lot of it is to do with the regulatory framework. So it's the way in which people are adopting new technologies, or it's financial models or business models. In other words, it wasn't making financial or economic sense to do certain things. So we are now working very much more both on what we think of as the demand side, so helping shape the markets that are coming through, as well as developing these new solutions to make change happen. And so it's all about how do you create the enabling environment to help these new approaches, new ideas, new solutions come in and be adopted and taken forward. And that's not starting with us sort of telling people how they should do it. This is about how do we create the conditions to allow these brilliant new approaches to actually be adopted and scaled.
And is this done with a European perspective, or is it done on a country by country, member state by member state basis?
So we operate across the whole of the European Union in different ways. So our model is very much that we work across different member states, but then individual member states, we tend to dive into particular topic areas. So in the example of Ireland, obviously the focus has been this partnership we have with DAFM in terms of how do we help Ireland deliver on its ambitions around climate change within the agri-food sector, whilst retaining a thriving food sector going forward. So we both work and share experiences, knowledge, insights from multiple countries, but then we accept that actually how you make change happen depends entirely on the local context, on the local social, economic, cultural context of where you're operating. So that means a much more detailed partnership approach within different member states like Ireland. And again, I do stress, we are not coming in from this on the assumption that we somehow have some magic expert knowledge that we're bringing into Ireland. What we have is processes by which we can help those in Ireland and other countries really try and bring forward some of their own ideas. So a lot of it is about amplifying existing work that is being done well. Some of it is about bringing ideas from elsewhere, but a lot is about how do we bring forward the solutions that are already bubbling up in places like Ireland and actually help them scale, basically.
Can you explain the deep demonstration model then? That has been discussed at the conference here today, and we've talked about it in many of the panel discussions that we have heard from various speakers today. But the real concept of something being very deep has really come through in a lot of what the speakers have said in terms of sustainability. So can you explain what the deep demonstration model is, Andy?
Yeah, so let me start with the demonstration bit. One of the things that we were finding, and many organizations were finding, was that there is no shortage of good ideas out there, and there's no shortage of knowledge. What was the challenge was that people were gently skeptical, shall we say, of yet another pitch for yet another bit of knowledge about this is what you need to do to make a change. So what we showed was that we need to be able to show in practice to individuals, to organizations, to companies that change is possible and that positive change is possible. So this really stems from there's a lovely phrase called where there's a will, there's a way. We've kind of turned that on its head based on different people's comments, which is actually our experience within making change happen is that when you show that change is possible, then people suddenly you entrain people and you find that change is expanding, it networks, it goes beyond where we started from. So for us, it's all about how do we show that positive change is possible? That's the demonstration piece. On the grounds that once you do that, people will believe that it is actually possible and will then take it forward. The deep bit is really about saying that this is not about, feeding a sort of consultancy, here's the solution, here we go off and you sort it out yourselves. This is about saying this only works if you build the partnerships, if you build what we think of as radical collaboration, bringing different people together to try and explore what would actually work in Ireland. That's, and that the particular cultural, the social, the regulatory context in Ireland is different from elsewhere. And so how do we actually really bring forward that knowledge, that skill set, that understanding? And that's, again, not about us coming to this with the answers. It's about how do we encourage and enable the answers to be pulled through from within the Irish context. So that's the deep piece, which is we can only make this work if we really engage, we listen, we learn, we test, we scale with the players that are operating day to day in Ireland.
By players, what do you mean? Because I'm sure I'll have listeners who don't understand the concept or the theory of what is happening here and who it actually applies to. Are you talking about literally from farm to fork? So you're talking from farmer all the way up through the supply chain.
Yeah, and we're thinking about all the elements that go into that. So, as a farmer, we need the farmers on board, so we've been engaging with them. For them to make a change, they're going to need money. So you need to be thinking about who's going to pay them, who's going to invest in that space. So we need to bring the banks or the sovereign wealth fund in play. If we're talking about the regulatory context, we need to make sure the government's in the room. If we're talking about moving up the supply chain and thinking about the agri-food processors or the cooperatives and so on, all of those need to be engaged, aware of what we are trying to do and bringing their own ideas, own approaches so that we can bring those together. So it is very much about understanding in detail what is going on the ground, understanding where the potential intervention points are. In other words, what are the things that we could test and try? And let's be honest, change requires some form of risk-taking. That's been a theme that's come out a bit in this meeting today. So we need to be able to go and test stuff, experiment, try things out. We need to have the comfort and the funding to allow us to do that without somebody losing their livelihood. So we need to be able to have that sense of we can test it, we can trial it, we can expand it, and once the ideas are embedded, we can then start to scale very rapidly. But that does require that core understanding of who are the players in that system. It might be the regulator, it might be the investor, it might be the farmer, it might be the agri-food processor. All of those are the players that we are seeing in the system.
Forgive us as well if you hear a little sound in the background. As I said, we are at a live conference today and not in our usual studio setting, if you hear little bumps and bangs in the background. But Andy, in terms of the Irish context then, this is a collaboration with the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine here. And you mentioned that you want to scale up from the bottom up, get the solutions from the bottom up. What has been the level of engagement with stakeholders here and the reception to something like this?
So we've been really pleased, and we've had to work very closely with the department in terms of working with them through an understanding who are the people we need to be inviting to this space to have these conversations. So over the last year, we've been running a series of workshops where we've been inviting representatives from across the value chain, from the investors and so on, all into a space where we can engage them about asking that question. And so much of this comes down to, can we create the space to have some of these difficult conversations about what is possible within a particular context, within a farming context, or within a region or a county context, what is actually possible. And some of that requires us to have these workshops which are very open. They're very much about creating an enabling environment to have difficult conversations. And I think that's been one of the positive things from our side, has that I think we as an outsider, we haven't got an axe to grind in this space. We're able to help the department, we're able to help the different stakeholders to come together around those sorts of issues.
Sometimes I think there's a perception, certainly in the agri-business sector, from the farmer right up to the retailer nearly, that things coming from Europe are a little scary or a little bit of, a diktat in some ways, and stakeholders can be a little apprehensive of getting involved in something like this. How does the Climate-KIC work to try and communicate a message of, I suppose, real collaboration? And something that came up at the conference today, trust, was a big, big theme that came through in many different guises. And in many different sections of the agri-food system, trust is vital. So how does the Climate-KIC try and build that trust with the stakeholders in a particular industry, in a particular country?
So I think the agri-food industry and farming in particular has suffered from a lot of people pointing fingers at it and basically saying, you're a problem. I guess we're coming very much from a different perspective, which is to say, we are not coming sort of saying, hey, look, there are all these targets you've got to hit. What we're saying is, where are the possibilities? Where are the opportunities for making change happen? And so we're very much focused as an innovation agency on how do you make positive change happen? And so that's the message that we're bringing in to both the department and to the wider stakeholders, which is, I have no idea what the sector is going to look like in 10, 20, 30 years. What I'm interested in is, how do we bring the people together that do have solutions, do have answers or offers or ideas that we can collate into a sensible, cohesive place that we can start to say, let's try and make this happen in practice on the ground. Let's test, let's learn. Yeah, because the only way we're actually going to get through this in the next 10, 20, 30 years is by testing new things, getting genuine peer approval, and then seeing people adopt and take it up at a very, very fast scale. And so the only way we can do that is to build that trust, and it's to focus much more on the emerging opportunities, not on the finger pointing. And that's the approach we're taking.
Absolutely. And the conference here today has had examples from different regions and different countries. Is there anything that stands out to you about Ireland or our engagement and our involvement with Climate-KIC or any of the projects so far, or something that you see Ireland leading the way in terms of its sustainability in the agri-food system?
So I think our experience, and certainly talking to our partners in other countries who have come to this conference, so the likes of Slovenia, Spain and others, is that they are very aware that Ireland plays an outsized role in the export markets, that it's a very powerful player in that space, and that we are seeing Ireland wanting to take more of a global role to show how change is possible within the agri-food system that you have. So we're seeing people looking to Ireland for leadership in this space. That doesn't mean that Ireland has all the answers, but it does mean that people start to appreciate when governments, when others are starting to test things, as we talked about in the conference, to take some risks, to say, look, we don't have the answers. We need to understand from others how we make it happen. So I think what people are looking to, and what our experience of Ireland is that Ireland is in an incredibly strong position to really take a leadership role within Europe, if not beyond, in terms of how do we bring these different elements, the financing, the regulatory frameworks, the behaviors that we see across in the social behaviors that we see, and try and understand how we move this forward in a way that helps the sector to thrive. And we're not seeing a lot of that in many other countries. We're seeing elements that are really good, but we're headquartered in the Netherlands. You've got a lot of angry farmers in the Netherlands because of various issues. What's interesting is seeing how much more open we are seeing things in Ireland in terms of being able to try things out, to actually just come and listen and learn from what others are doing, which we're not necessarily seeing in some of the other countries.
We do have a lot of knowledge transfer here and knowledge transfer groups, schemes and so on. And I do feel that there is a sense in Ireland of people within the industry really wanting to engage and wanting to change. And while it doesn't have to be an overnight systems change, has been the phrase that we've used today, although some people get a little bit scared with the word change. But I suppose it's something farmers, co-ops, processors, retailers have been doing anyway over the years. They just didn't know they were doing it, And we've heard lots of initiatives that are being undertaken in Ireland to try and become more sustainable. Now, I know a colleague of yours, Suzanne Reinders, mentioned, and she's on the governing board of Climate-KIC. She mentioned that she had come for a visit to Ireland and really learned about our Origin Green branding and the ambassador system. And she found that so fruitful. And so, while in Ireland, sometimes Origin Green and Borbia, which runs the Origin Green marketing campaign, can get a lot of criticism. It's interesting to see abroad that, one man's meat is another man's poison. But at the same time, things that we are doing here are really being looked at from other member states and said, okay, well, Ireland, it looks good, seem to be successful in it.
Yeah, and certainly that's also the feedback we're getting from some of our partners in other countries, which is not to say that they can simply come and pick up and take whatever's going on in Ireland back to their country, but learning what does work and what doesn't is invaluable, and thinking about some of the, and I'm talking about very granular things here. We were talking at a meeting at breakfast this morning around things like, the fact that across Europe we have aging workforces. How do you support the transition within families and taking farms from one generation into the next and so on? And a lot of the thinking that was going on in Ireland was of genuine interest to our colleagues in Slovenia, in Spain and elsewhere. So we are starting to see some genuine sort of, eye-opening, okay, that's a good idea. Why don't we go and look at that ourselves? So I think that type of sharing of knowledge, not just within Europe, we can talk about going to New Zealand as well about some of these issues. I think that type of thing is just genuinely so valuable, for both sides in terms of the sharing and the learning of what others are doing.
We have so many people attending today at the conference and people joined online as well. Where does the Climate-KIC project go from here in terms of the collaboration with DAFM here in Ireland in the Irish context?
So really, we've had the last sort of 18 months have really been what you might think of as the setup, which is a lot of the engagement, a lot of the bringing people in, listening to what people have to say from different parts of the sector. From our perspective, what has been now co-developed with these stakeholders are these big 7 flagships, which are kind of the interventions that we're proposing with DAFM that we need to go and test and develop. And 4 of those are around, carbon farming, beef, dairy, tillage. And then there are 3 more generic ones that are looking forward to what do farms, what if you were a farmer, what would it look like? What would it feel like? What would it smell like to be on a farm in 2030, 2040, 2050? And what is the vision for farming in Ireland going forward? What about the value chains? Are there other value chains that can come through? Or more broadly, what about the bioeconomy that we've got within Ireland? So we're now at the starting point of actually, let's go and test these and learn. So the next step from our perspective is mobilizing the funding and finance to make that happen. That's not all going to come from DAFM or Climate-KIC, which is where we've been funding it from in the past. That's going to come from, we're bringing in colleagues and other organizations who are putting money in to try and test some of these ideas out. It'll be about bringing commercial entities in to start investing in some of these. So it's going to be a mix. So our big step at the moment is just getting that funding and finance to go and test these ideas out and learn. Because at the end of the day, our innovation model is that none of us know exactly how this is going to pan out. You can only do it by testing, learning, scaling, which is that's where the real gold dust, the intelligence that comes out of the work that we are doing, is from people going, testing, learning, sharing with their peers, working out whether it works or not. And if we can show that change is possible, then you'll get more and more people following through that. So that's kind of the exciting thing that's about to happen over the next 2 or 3 years, is that actually seeing real things happen on the ground, in the processors, in the farms, thinking about the financial models, the financing that would actually make that happen. That's kind of where we are at the moment. So it's kind of exciting times.
It is exciting times. And in the next 2 to 3 years, we will be ever more closer to 2030. And in Ireland, we have a climate strategy in terms of our agri-food business, Food Vision 2030. We do have to reduce our agricultural emissions by 25% also, which is, a really difficult challenge for many in the agri-food system. But I do believe that there is a willingness and an acknowledgement there now that, like it or loathe it, I think everyone understands we have to do it. And certainly from the discussions that we've had with the various panelists today and the parallel workshops that are taking place as well, where people get to engage and discuss ideas more, I wonder, will events like this and projects such as this that Climate-KIC undertakes, will it create more of a perception out there of, systems change being a little bit more accessible than people actually think, and maybe communicate the message more that sustainability is the future? Why don't we get on board? As you mentioned in your earlier kind of comments at the start of this podcast, where you were saying it's not us telling people what to do, because I think that there has been a lot of that in the past in terms of agriculture and agribusiness, and they don't want any more of that. But I'm very much getting the sense from you, Andy, that it's you tell us what you think works. Would I be correct in saying that?
Yeah, very much. And also, how do we create those, how do we create the enabling conditions, by which I mean, we support lots of early stage businesses with new ideas. How do we help those to grow in these places? So I agree that the language has often been inaccessible. It's often felt to be top down, you must do it. And that's very much not what we're talking about. We're talking about, can we work not just bringing in those ideas from Europe, but actually, you have a phenomenally sort of innovative system here within Ireland. You've got very good institutions that are doing good work here already. It's much more about, how do we help to amplify the really good work that is going on there? How do we bring those through so that it is very much about livelihoods at the end of the day? It's about focusing on, how do we help individuals thrive under change? And the change isn't just because of the climate regulations. It's coming from social change around the world. It's coming from geopolitics. It's coming from high energy costs. There's a whole bunch of very rapid changes taking place. So the question is, how do we make sure that the economic sector of the agri-food system within Ireland thrives through that period of rapid change, basically?
Absolutely. And finally, I might just follow up on that point, Andy. It's about environmental sustainability. But one thing that really has come across in many discussions with many agencies and people involved in the agri-food business is that environmental sustainability comes at an economic cost. and it is not free. And to change will involve investment. So I wanted to ask you about the input or the engagement that the likes of Climate-KIC is getting from the banking sector, investment sector. We have some representatives of ag tech investment fund companies here today. Are they willing to put their money where their mouth is, as the saying goes?
Yeah, I mean, on our consultative group, which is the group overseeing this work, we have the Bank of Ireland, we have the Sovereign Wealth Fund, we have people who are very interested in this space. Our experience is that there is a wall of money out there looking for a home. There is no shortage of money. There is a shortage of assets, bankable assets. There's a shortage of investable projects, in a way, not so much because of high returns, but because of uncertainty about how the project's going to pan out. So a lot of our work is actually about that mobilizing not just public grants and philanthropic sort of high risk money, which we need, but also on the scaling piece. How do we bring in the normal financial institutions to support that change? And some of that could be as simple as just making sure we've got better insurance products. Some of it will be around getting the banking thinking about taking a spread of bets around what they're investing into, acknowledging that not all of them will work. So there is quite a lot of work from our side with the finance institutions generally about this. And we've been engaged with things like Climate Finance Week in Ireland over a number of years for precisely that reason, because there's some very innovative financial products coming in that could support the sector. But for us, it is about environmental sustainability. Our name, Climate-KIC, tells you that. But for us, that only works if you also bring in the economic. It has to work on the ground for the people. But it does require upfront investment. But the overall cost may not be as high as we think. And what we're seeing in many other sectors actually is if you do get the investment in, you can actually get a return on investment over the long term, which is actually beneficial. So that's what I would hope we will get to in the farming space as well.
Well, that's all we have time for, I'm afraid, on our Agri-Focus podcast for this week. I want to thank my guest, Andy Kerr, Chief Strategy Officer with EIT Climate-KIC, here at the EIT Climate-KIC conference taking place at O'Reilly Hall in UCD. As you said, Andy, very exciting times ahead. The next few years will tell a lot, and a lot of innovation happening over the next couple of years as well. That's all from the Agri-Focus podcast. Until next time, please rate and review. Give us 5 stars if you can, and be sure to check the Agriland app regularly for all the latest in agri news.